this day. You could probably even finish some of the phrases I'm about to start. What does it say? All men are created equal. Remember that one. That you have unalienable rights. It means you can do things and no one's allowed to take that away from you. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. See, we still remember it. This is the place where all that is voted on. It's approved here. You're walking through the same hallways that Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington early on were coming through as they're debating this whole idea of independence. Now, as we're starting our time together in, well, what back then they called not Independence Hall, because independence hadn't happened yet. To them, this place was called the Pennsylvania State House. So, since it's a state house, this is the colonial government building for the colony of Pennsylvania, which is why we're starting in a courtroom behind me. I don't know how many of you were expecting to see a courtroom when you walked in here, but this is an important part of this story. I'm going to start by answering two questions that I get asked all the time when people come in here. I find it helps just to answer those right away. What in here is real? What was actually here and met those people back in 1776 that you all get to meet today? So look at the walls, see the wood panels, the columns carved into it, the archways over your heads, and yes, even that face that's looking down on us from across the hallway at the door. That is original. 70% of the woodwork you see today was actually here ever since they built this place between 1732 and the early 1750s. Now, the smaller items like the furniture, the books on the table, the walking sticks, they're all from the 1700s, but they were not in this building at the time. I only have a few witnesses for you folks to meet today, and I'll point them out as we go through. But the second question I get, related to that piece of paper we were just talking about, is this where they signed it? This room is not where they signed it. Don't worry, we'll get there in just a moment. This room actually kind of represents why they signed the Declaration of Independence. It's appropriate that we're starting in a courtroom because it's a little odd to think about today. Well, this is actually what they were interested in protecting. Because for some of the people who lived in the 1700s at that time, this was protecting them. They felt that this was protecting them. Now, just like you and myself today, in courtrooms, some people feel that their rights, their liberties are protected in those courtrooms. Some folks feel that they're not being protected in those courtrooms. It's no different than. But since we're talking about the Declaration of Independence, I want to share with you what that all meant to someone who signed the Declaration of Independence. A Massachusetts lawyer who's standing here would have told us what all this represented to him was that most excellent monument of human art, English common law. His name was John Adams. To him, this is the greatest defender of liberty on the face of the planet. Now today, the authority in the courtroom, you see that in one of the original items I have for you here, that painting that's up on the wall. Is anyone here from Pennsylvania? I'm the lone Pennsylvanian in the room. Well, I would recognize that from our state flag today. That's the coat of arms of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. That one's from 1785. That's after independence. It shows you the change in the authority in here going to the people of Pennsylvania. But in the 1776, if you and I walked in here with all the other people like Ben Franklin, this is what we would have seen up there. This is what John Adams was talking about as defending those liberties. Someone else's coat of arms. See a unicorn and a lion surrounding a crown, gilded in gold, weighing about 200 pounds. Does anyone know whose coat of arms these are? The king, George III. Absolutely. George III is our king. Pennsylvania and all the American colonies are part of the British Empire now. We're not just citizens of Pennsylvania with each other here, we're also British subjects. Huzzah! Okay, hold on to that thought till I get across the hall. But this, to John Adams, he was proud of this. Because in this courtroom, they are practicing English law, British law. And you get certain things underneath that British law. You see it just in the space around us here. This metal cage I'm standing in called the prisoner's dock. If I was accused of breaking the law, I had to stand here. But I'm given things. I'm given the right to a trial in which all of you, the public, can come in and watch this trial. I have the right, lawyers working at this round table up front, to have someone who knows that English common law defend me in this room. I can have a witness come in, tell people I'm not guilty of what I've been accused of, and the boxes around you, that's where a jury sits. Has anyone here served on a jury before? My unlucky feet, the rest of you, it's coming. But that, to me, you were people who I lived with here in Philadelphia. You, not the king, not some government somewhere else, decided if I was innocent or guilty. You had that right. The people of Pennsylvania had the right to decide what laws we are going to enforce here in Pennsylvania. You get to participate. That's protected under British law. Also protected under that same law is what's happening in the room across the hallway. It's called the Pennsylvania Assembly Chamber. If you are a man, 21 years old, white, and own property, you can vote for the people who sit in that room and write the laws that are applied to me over here. Even through that way, even though everyone can't vote, they see that as the right to participate in even writing the laws. That includes tax laws. See, that British Constitution says you can't be taxed unless you agree to it through someone representing you. That's why conflict builds up over 13 years before 1776. Can you folks remember what Americans were upset about during that time? I just mentioned it.
Stamp tax.
Taxes, and specifically the stamp tax, thank you, yeah. So what happens is after the 7 Years' War, also called the French and Indian War, it's a world war that the British Empire has won. That includes us here in Pennsylvania. But it cost a lot of money. They owe a lot of money to a lot of people. And they also want to station troops to protect us here, keep the peace in the colonies. That's going to cost money. And since that's for our protection, Parliament in England figures that we should help pay for it. They pass laws that make us pay a little extra money to use things that you folks probably still use in your lives today. How many of you use things with sugar in it? Don't lie, I know many of us do. Things with salt. Anything printed on paper.
Yep.
Playing cards, newspapers. If you are a student, you get worksheets at school. That worksheet better have a little piece of paper glued to it that looks like this. That stamp tax that we're talking about. This stamp had to be put on there. If it was not on there, that meant you were breaking the law. And under that same law, if you're breaking it, you could be sent overseas to be tried without a jury.
Wow.
The conflict comes because who here is supposed to write the tax laws? The assembly across the hallway. Because there you've chosen a representative. You have not chosen a representative in Parliament. That's the conflict. And remember what they were chanting in the streets. No taxation without representation. That was the conflict that they were in. They felt Parliament had no right to tax them. But Parliament said, you're part of the British Empire, we do have a right to tax you. We do have a right to write laws that you have to live under. That's why the conflict builds up 10 years going into 1776. And over time, you see their protests get louder and angrier and more violent as the conflict pulls them further and further apart from each other. That's why in April of 1775, it gets so bad, fighting breaks out at Lexington and Concord, Massachusetts. Americans are now shooting at their own army, British soldiers. The whole point of the protest was not independence. It was to fix the relationship, go back to enjoying what we had. But is that even going to be possible now that blood has been shed? That's why they come here the next month in May of 1775. Coming through those doors, Benjamin Franklin, Samuel Adams, his cousin John Adams, into this building. They're trying to figure out, what do we do now? How do we regain our liberties as British subjects? When is that even possible? Well, folks, let's continue that part of the story in the room where it did actually all happen. When you're ready, please head across the hallway, and as you go through the door, spread all the way to your left and right side.